1935, the Lions win the NFL championship. The Detroit Tigers take the World Series. The Red Wings bring home Lord Stanley's Cup. Joe Louis begins his rise to world domination. This transforms the Motor City into Detroit, City of Champions.
There is the crack of the bat, and we are off and running. We're going to dive into the pool again.
We're diving into the river.
Yeah, I'm Jamie Flanagan.
Charles Avison.
And
we're going to a blast from the past.
Oh, man. One of our favorite stories, one of our favorite guys.
Garwood.
Yes.
So today we're talking about his son today as the premise of the show, Garwood Jr. But upon looking into Garwood Jr., do my little cursory internet research just to see what's out there since my books come out.
Yeah,
I came across some seriously cool stuff about
magnificent,
Garwood.
interesting things.
Yes, it's some incredible stuff on Garwood.
All right.
Anybody's everybody that remember how much fun we had during the Garwood segment. This is like a blast. It's a return to that time because this stuff I got to show today is awesome.
All right.
So that's where we're going.
So are we going to start with because we relied heavily on the Speedboat Kings while we were talking about.
Yeah, this is not in there.
Garwood.
This is not in there.
And then the Harmsworth was the trophy.
Yes.
Itself, and then Orland and Gar were just characters upon characters.
Yeah.
But there's early stories. This is going to take us earlier, right?
Because here's the thing. So our Garwood story to take us back to the time.
So we want to talk to Gar first or about Junior first?
We'll talk about Junior because it'll fade into we'll fade into what Junior did because Junior was one of the 33 championships from 1935. And so, let's just I'm a fan of like the timeline. So it's better. I like to begin before all the, the Garwood stuff, Garwood Jr.'s son.
Okay.
And get into what I wanted to sort of share because the Garwood story that we told, again, it was based, largely off of Speedboat Kings. And so, and a few other side things that I
writing
found
again, the writing in that book was just
amazing.
Wild.
It's amazing. And so if to recall, we go back to that Garwood segment we did, and their early life of Garwood is something that was very minimalistic from the story that we told, that we brought, that we showed. And it really, the only real there was a couple of really early life stories that we had for Garwood. And the first was that he was a traveling salesman, and that at one point he came across a boat race and there was a guy working on his engine, and Garwood helped him fix his engine. And he sort of inadvertently got caught up in a boat race and then won the race. And that was really the extent of the story. There was no real details on it. There was no information, any context to put that in.
Right.
That was like one of the first elements of the story. That we had a story about his father being a ship captain.
So that takes us back to episode 51.
Okay, yeah,
and Garwood encompassed episodes 51 through 65.
Yes, we did a lot of Garwood.
Yeah,
we loved it.
But his story as it unfolded was just magnificent.
Absolutely.
And part of that was our trip to the Packard plant.
Yes, that was one of my favorite ones.
And a lot of background, and we did that live on site at the Packard plant right in front of the Miss America 10. But you're saying that you have, because it was just very sketchy. Well, he got involved in some race somehow.
Well, it was not. I wouldn't say sketchy,
but it was thin.
It's very thin, very thin on facts, very thin on context as far as what he was doing at that time.
Right,
like I said, he was a traveling salesman. It was all we had.
The context was thin.
Yes, and then
you have more.
There was virtually no context.
Right,
it was that he was a traveling. The story that we told at that time for his early life was that he was a traveling salesman. That at one point or another he came across. He was traveling through. He saw a boat race. He was interested in the boat race, and then he helped the guy fix his boat. And then he it was too late to get off the boat. And then the race started in Garwood. They won the race. And then again, we mentioned the fact that his father was a steamboat captain, so he had a little experience in the in the world of boat, in the world of boats. His dad was a captain of a ship. And so that's where he kind of got his, intro to sea life or whatever in his childhood. And then the third component that we had for his early life was how he founded his company, which was, and I even admitted this at the time that, it was a sort of a folklore legend that he was sitting there basically eating a sandwich one day and that he was watching a guy shovel coal off the back of a a flatbed truck,
Mm-hmm.
and that he was like, well, there's got to be a better way to do this and that, and so he invented the hydraulic hoist.
Yeah.
And then that's what made him millions, and that's what allowed him to focus on boat building and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Which those are the three main components. That's how we let off that entire thing. Like that, we probably covered that in the first, 20, maybe the first half of the first of that episode 51.
There,
yes. And then we moved on. The rest of his career, we spent the rest of all those episodes on. So the early life of Garwood was incredibly thin.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I found this article. This is, again, I was just looking up information on Garwood Jr., and I came across this article. It came out in 2014, basically when I put out the third book.
Okay.
So I just missed it. Like guy,
dang it.
This guy must have been putting this article out just as I was like publishing the third book, right? So I wish, you'd be like, oh, I wish he was out there at that time, but it is what it is. Life, it is what it is. So
volume 4 coming soon.
Yes. So anyways,
the podcast is
this article, I don't know. Can we can put the link in the description or something?
Yeah, absolutely.
So we'll put the link in the description. Do you want me to message you now, Jamie? Is that something we should do now? Okay. So anyways, so I'll just read the article just in case. I'll just read so the article, it's on a website called coachbuilt.com.
Mm-hmm.
Like as in coach, like a motor coach. So coachbuilt.com, and these guys, it's this massive website where there's all these articles about motor coaches, right? Buses and everything, and like everything in between. And this guy wrote this phenomenal article. I mean, this is like, if you were to print this out, it'd be like 20 pages long at least. Right. I mean, it's this massive thing. We're not going to read this entire article,
okay,
but I do want to read his intro talking about Garwood Jr.'s early story, Garwood Sr., Garwood's early story. And so just to, so the article is, it's on coachbuilt.com, and the name of the article is Garwood and Company, Wood Hydraulic Hoist and Body Company, Garwood Industries. That's the title. It's not, there's nothing that's like, it's almost just like a history. It's like almost like an index type of an article. It is fact upon fact. The guy uses, he details his sources. I would love to have this guy on the show. I mean, seriously. And his name is
Rumpelstiltskin.
So 2004, Mark Theobald.
Okay.
Mark Theobald for coachbuilt.com, 2014. And again, I would love to talk with this guy because, this guy knows his Garwood, and he cites that Speedboat Kings as well. When he starts getting into Garwood story, just like we did, he used Speedboat Kings for his like later life Garwood information.
Mm-hmm.
But his early stuff, he draws on a major article that I noticed, that a major thing that he draws on that I did not have. But he draws on sources from all over the place. It's crazy. I don't know. He's really into it, or he had some source that pointed at him into all kinds of great directions. But there was an article that he refers to quite a bit, and it was it must have been a magazine article called The Rudder. The magazine was called The Rudder.
Okay,
and it was a 1935 article, which Garwood had this huge life story article or something, because he cites heavily from this article, 1935, the magazine again called The Rudder. And so when we get to those quotes, I'll mention that, mention that it comes from there. But I just want to read to this guy's intro because he encompasses he talks about those three elements. And I was actually quite happy to know that we were right on those three things.
Okay.
But he's got way more context to frame it in, and it makes us understand who Garwood was. It blows your mind when you see it, and it's amazing. So without any further ado, you got anything else to say, or do you want me to just jump right into it? Okay. All right. So I'm just going to read again, Mark Theobald, tremendous article. I'm just going to read the intro, and I'm going to direct everybody there that is interested in Garwood that you got to have a look at this article. We'll put the link in the description.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to try to skip through some of the chunks that is not, like I say, summarize it a little bit. Let me just skip ahead. So, what was it? All right. I'm just going to start at the beginning. So, Garza, okay. All right. So, we'll begin in this light. This is the beginning. So Garwood was born December 4th, 1880 in Mapleton, Monona County, Iowa. And it talks about his parents, how we got named. We already talked about how we got named. So his father, Walter Wood, was a Civil War veteran who ran away from home at the age of 15 to join the Union Army, where he served as a drummer boy. After the war, Walter worked at a variety of jobs, eventually settling in Mapleton, where he ran a small grocery store. In the 1860s, his wife's family relocated from New York to Minnesota in order to establish a stagecoach line running between St. Paul and Duluth. Garfield was the third born of 12 children whose names and birth order follow. And there's a huge list of names. We're just going to skip through that. The 1875 Minnesota State Census places Walter Wood in St. Paul, Minnesota, although they relocated to Mapleton in 1877 and 1881. So he uses census data. This guy's into it. This guy is. I mean, he's digging deep. This guy went beyond where I went. I mean, this guy was this. He spent a ton of time on this. About 1883, the Wood family moved to Osakis, Minnesota, where Walter found work on the Great Northern Railroad during the winter, and during the summer tourist season operated the Manitoba, a small steam paddle boat that took tourists up, down, and across Lake Osakis, a 10-mile-long resort lake located 120 miles northwest of Minneapolis. Young Garfield's business career started around the age of 8, when he started working for a dairy farmer for a reported $40 a month. At the age of 12, he established his own Osakis Lake fishing excursions, taking visitors around the lake for $1 a trip. This is Gar then, taking his own fishing business. He also tried his hand at constructing scale ship models propelled by small clockwork motors constructed using components sourced from spring-wound alarm clocks. So he's working on motorboats with spring alarm clocks. As he grew older, he often worked for his father on the Manitoba. And at that time, another ferry, the 61-foot Merry Man, plied the same waters, and a rivalry developed between Captain Wood and the Merry Man's pilot, Jacob Wesley Mann. In the September 1935 issue of The Rudder, Wood describes the day the two vessels went head-to-head, an event which had a great effect on his later life and years. Listen to this. During the year of 1885, this is Gar Wood. During the year of 1885, I received my first taste of boat racing. I was 2 years old then, and the Wood family had moved to Lake Osakis, Minnesota, where my father operated a clumsy old wood-burning steamboat, the Manitoba, as a ferry across the lake. There was another ferry on the lake owned by Wesley Mann and named for him, and considerable rivalry existed between the two boats. Whenever we met, an informal race took place. The speeds were slow, but the excitement was terrific. When I was 8, the race to end all races and decide for all time the championship of Lake Osakis was held. One day, when the Manitoba was plying over the lake in the course of her daily duties, the man appeared from behind going full speed. My father was the wheel of the Manitoba, and my brothers and I, the entire crew, were looking after the fire and doing odd jobs around the deck. As soon as the man came abreast of us, we crowded on all steam, and the race of the century began. Our old boat slowly but surely drew ahead. Then, when we still had a mile or more to go, we discovered that we didn't have enough fuel to finish at top speed. Break up the furniture, yelled my father. So we set to it with axes, smashing every available piece of woodwork and feeding it into the furnace. We won the race, but there wasn't a table or chair left on board when we got to shore. As nearly as I can remember, we averaged 8 miles an hour. Wood later recalled, I still feel the thrill of winning that race. The engines driving those paddle wheels fascinated me. I resolved right then that someday I was going to build race boats of my own. I'll pause there for a second.
I love that.
That's the most amazing stories. Dude, what better like this? We're into. I guess you'd call this the prequel, right?
Yeah.
Like we're like.
Oh
this
my
is like
God.
we're jumping. You know, we started with
You
the
thought
end
you
of the
loved
story
Garwood before.
Exactly, and then like listen to this. Like, oh my God,
break up the
furniture. You know, like
grab your sister's doll.
He said the race of the century
Throw
began.
it in there.
He said it was only 8 miles an hour we were headed, but it was the greatest race ever.
8 miles an hour. The bug got bit by the bug.
Yes. So he'd break up the furniture and they won the race. So okay. So he says some years later, after the family had moved it said, I'll backtrack. The entire Wood family moved to Duluth, Minnesota in 1890 as Walter had taken a position with the Lakeside Land Company, a real estate developer. The elder Wood then took a position with the U.S. government as captain of the steam launch Tangent and the propeller-driven Vedette, two boats that were used for surveying the Lake Superior coastline during the planning and construction of the Duluth Harbor. 12-year-old Gar was also provided with a government position detailed in his 1935 article, The Rudder. Some years later, after the family had moved to Duluth, Minnesota, when I was nearly out of high school, 3 motorboats were bought and put in service in the harbor by the government engineering department. I was intensely interested in them, and when an expert from the boat factory came down to put the engines in shape, I tagged him all around and succeeded in landing a part-time job working around the boats. The 1896 Duluth director. I mean, this is Garwood is living the boat life.
Yeah.
This is not like something where he just randomly was like, oh, my dad was a captain. No, he's like every single day. Wait till it gets even more so. It's all he does is boats. That's it. So while in Duluth, Gar attended the Lakeside Elementary School, but was more interested in his vocational career, which in addition to his job with the federal government included a stint as a boatman for the Duluth Boat Club, as well as an electrician for the Duluth Telephone Company. The 1899 Duluth directory lists his father as Captain Tangent, and then a huge address to this, a bunch of census details. And this is Garwood talking again from this Rudder article in 1935. My first real job, which influenced my whole life, was partly due to a redheaded girl. The Army major in charge of the boats was in love with the girl and wanted to take her on picnics across the lake. He needed someone to run the engine for him, so I was appointed. After demonstrating I could run the engines, the picnics were a decided success. The major made marvelous headway, and I learned a lot about marine engines and boats.
And a little bit about women.
A little bit about women, too, I'm sure. I worked on those boats several years at a salary of $45 a month. The boats were used principally to carry engineering inspectors from one job to another. In the day's travel, they got almost as much thrill as we do now from a major race. In those days, there were no carburation system in the gasoline engines. We used high-test gasoline and air valves. The power would drop as the engines were used, and usually after a few hours, they were pretty weak. You would have to keep the air valve closed. If you opened it, there was a backfire. I decided that if I could get gasoline into the engine in conjunction with the air, I could keep up power. So I experimented with a squirt can. I would open the air valves and squirt in gasoline. Thus, I had the crude equivalent of a modern carburetor. Those old-type engines had their spark fixed. Advanced spark had not yet been invented, but by a system of trial and error, I discovered that sticking a screwdriver between the spark cam and the roller advanced the spark, increased the power of the engine, and made the boat run faster. With a squirt can and a screwdriver, our engine was speeded up, and we invariably won. We kept the secret. As we cruised over those Minnesota waters at 8 or 10 miles an hour, I used to dream of myself building and driving the fastest boat in the world and winning important trophies. Little did I know that this ambition would be realized, but later events made them possible, and I humbly thank the redheaded girl and hope that she lived happily ever after. So listen to this stuff. This guy he's like, we had a crude carburetor. This guy's using a screwdriver and a gas can to tweak the end. I don't even know exactly what he's talking about, but he's like, what is he at the 16 years old? And he's operating, he's coming up with, he's doing what we were talking about in that story. I think this is the biggest thing that this article really brings forth with regards to Garwood. We're not talking about some rich guy who just liked speedboat racing and was sort of sponsoring boats and then wanted to just get behind the wheel because he thought it because he was the rich guy
busting up
this
furniture.
Is a guy that is
making 25 cents for driving people across the lake.
This is a guy who was building boats and designing and having everything to do with speed on water from the earliest possible age. And he was, I mean, this is not just some rich guy who was like to just dabble in boats. He has been, he made money, as we're going to kind of see, almost as a way to further his interest in boat design. That's where we're going to get. That's the point we're going to get to. But that's like one of the biggest sort of revelations from this is that if there's any idea that Garwood was just some rich guy that hired Chris Smith, Chris Craft gets all the, gets really a lot of the shine is like, oh, everybody knows Chris Craft boats. Yeah, he was Chris Smith was amazing. But Garwood was not just some rich guy that just was able to cobble together these, the best and the brightest and build these boats. This is a guy that I guarantee, he's intimately involved with the development of all these boats that he raced. And these stories demonstrate, his background. So to continue, his job at the U.S. Engineering Corps ended soon after the turn of the century. And in 1903, Gar embarked on a course of study at the Armour Institute of Technology in Chicago. Founded in 1890 with a $1 million endowment by Chicago meatpacker Philip D. Armour Sr., the Institute provided its students with a well-rounded vocational education in architecture, chemistry, droughting, electricity, engineering, and library science. Upon his return to Duluth, Gar took a job with the Zenith Telephone Company, who were in the midst of a $1 million expansion. The 1904 Duluth Directory lists him. There's a bunch of his lists his career and everything. In early 1905, Garfield took a position at the Duluth sales representative as the Duluth sales representative for the Minnesota Ford distributor. The Model T had not yet been invented.
Oh.
And the latest Ford was the Model N, successor to the Model A. His early interest in speed is revealed in a 1905 municipal court case where he was charged with carelessly and negligently operating an automobile at a high rate of speed on May 30th, 1905. So the May 30th, 1905 issue of the Duluth Herald reporting. So this is a newspaper report, right? Mm-hmm. Edward M. Kelly has brought suit against A.H. Smith and Garfield A. Wood in municipal court to recover judgment for $60 alleged to be due as damages for running over and fatally injuring the former's dog with an automobile. He killed a dog driving this car. Mr. Kelly in his complaint says he had a valuable fox terrier and that May 8th at London Road and 42nd Avenue East Messrs. Smith and Wood came along in an automobile running at high speed and carelessly and negligently ran over the dog. Gar killed a dog, man. So he demonstrates his love of speed. So 1906, again, he lists somewhere what the census directories talk about. He later stated that he sold 10 cars in the first year in business, but was eventually forced to close his doors due to a lack of a new inventory. Wood later sued the Ford distributor and won his case, but by that time he had returned to working as an engineer, his occupation in the 1908 Duluth directory being electrical engineer. In early 1908, Wood left Duluth for St. Paul, where he took a position with the local Ford dealer, the Northwestern Automobile Company, whose listing in the 1908 directory shows. Wood was originally attracted to St. Paul via the racing boats of Duluth's resident yachtsman, Richard Schell, who were all constructed by the Joseph Dingle Boat Works, whose factory was situated on the shore of the Mississippi River. Wood recalled the move in St. Paul in the rudder. When I stopped running the government motorboats, automobiles were coming into general use, and I decided to work as an automobile mechanic. Later, I moved to St. Paul, Minnesota, where I was married and started selling the new automobiles Henry Ford was putting on the market. So Wood supplemented his income from auto sales by teaching a course in automotive engineering at a local vocational school and by selling lightning rods to farmers, even inventing an induction coil device to demonstrate their effectiveness. In 1909, in conjunction with Nels C. Christensen, Wood established his own automobile, electric, and novelty business, which was listed in the St. Paul Business Directory. A ton of information on that.
Yeah.
So it keeps on going with the census, talking about where he was in 1910. So more on that. So he's okay. So on September 14th, 1910, he married Merlin M. Fellows, the daughter of Henry Romine. All it talks about her background. Although she was born in California, Wood met Merlin in Duluth while she was a student at Duluth Central High School. After her 1904 graduation, she attended the University of Minnesota in Minneapolis, from which she graduated with a BA in 1908. Their marriage license dated September 10th lists his address, and it keeps on going when I was addressing that. In his 1935 Rudder article, Wood recalled his first cruise on the Mississippi, because that's where it looks like. So while I was in St. Paul, a friend asked me if I would like to go on a cruise down the Mississippi with him in a new boat he had built. He wanted me to do the navigating, and I was delighted to go on a vacation. We took our wives along and arrived in Dubuque. On the morning, some motor races were being held. This is where we're getting to that race.
Yeah.
As we were going alongside the dock, so he was on this vacation with his wife and his friend, right? So that's why he was like, this is like a vacation for him. I saw a man tinkering with the engine of a racing boat called the Leading Lady. When we ran past her, I asked the man in the boat if I could be of any help. He asked me aboard, and after a little while, we had the engine running nicely and took her down the river in a race. The banks of the river seemed to fly past me. I had never gone so fast in my life. When we got back, whistles were blowing and people were cheering, and we suddenly found ourselves in the middle of an excited crowd. You did that 10-mile run at 30 miles an hour, someone said. You've broke the world's record.
Ooh.
The thrill of breaking a world's record has never left me. So he set the world record in the first day, 30 miles an hour on vacation. The owner of the Leading Lady was William P. Cleveland, a chemist and motorboat racing enthusiast from Joplin, Missouri.
An evil chemist?
Yes, most likely. Yes. Are there any other kinds? Yes. In 1911, Wood and Cleveland modified the hull and entered her in some races on the old Mississippi Valley Powerboat Association circuit in the Midwest. They managed to win a few trophies, but lacked the financing to be truly competitive. Wood recalled the first boat he constructed on his own in his 1935 Rudder autobiography. When I returned to St. Paul, I built my first real speedboat. She was a single-step hydroplane similar to our present Miss America, but crude and small. The little leading lady, that's what he called it. Her hull cost me $40, and the engine was the same one used in the Leading Lady, which had made 30 miles an hour. The little Leading Lady made 34 miles an hour and won every race in which she entered. Try reading that as a tongue twister. Leading lady, little leading lady. The little leading lady to this. So although Wood was now directly involved in powerboat racing, his limited funds made it necessary to keep his mind open to additional money-making opportunities. While purchasing gears to build more demonstrators for his lightning protection business, Garr stumbled onto his first big invention and one that would assist to establish his fortune. This is where he learned, where he was about to build the hydraulic hoist. This is in his own words. The hydraulic hoist for dump trucks. He recalled how he accidentally stumbled upon a coal deliveryman jacking up the front end of his Pierce Arrow delivery truck in the rudder. So he stumbled on this.
Yeah.
One day I saw a truck driver dumping a 5-ton load of coal by hand and got the idea, which supplied me with the money to do the thing I had always wanted to do: boat racing and building. So this is what he wants to do. He needs money to do what he wants to do. So boat racing and building. It took that truck driver nearly half an hour of hard work to tip the truck body to dump the coal. Why, I thought, isn't there some mechanical contrivance operated by the engine to do all that work for him? I studied this problem for a time. In fact, I thought of little else. What I needed was something simple and foolproof that could be operated by simply pulling a lever or pushing a button. Then I remembered the hydraulic cylinder on the old Manitoba, which my father had used in reversing his engines. It was built on the general lines that I wanted, but I had to have something to pump high oil pressure with. I sent for details and catalogs of every gear pump made. None seemed to answer the exact purpose. The pressure and power were too low, but I tried one out and found the manufacturer had underestimated the qualities of his own product. He recalled breaking the news to Merlin that he needed to spend their life savings, $200, to produce a working prototype. And this is Garr himself. I've got a new idea, a mechanical advice for dumping trucks. Shall I put money in it? She was a good sport and said to go ahead, that $200 would not make or break us. Wood approached the local Pierce Arrow truck distributor, Grant Waldreff, manager of Waldreff Auto Motor Car Company, with a business proposition. Wood would design and construct a working prototype, and if it proved successful, Waldorf would supply the financing to put it into production. Wood spent approximately $100 on the finished prototype, which consisted of 4.5 feet by 5-inch hydraulic cylinder, and there's a whole bunch of details. The upper end of a piston rod carrying the hoisting pulleys. It's a whole huge detailed description of this. So once completed, Wood installed the lift on a short dump body attached to one of the Northern Fuel Company's Pierce Arrow coal delivery trucks and invited a number of local businessmen, including Northwest owner, to the Pierce Arrow garage for demonstration. Wood later recalled, the owner of the truck and a group of other men who had been attending a party heard our experiment one night and hurried to the garage. We were all ready for the final job. Most of them were top-hatted in informal dress, but they climbed into the truck body and we started the hoist. It shot up too fast and rolled a dozen well-dressed gentlemen unceremoniously onto the floor. They took it good-naturedly, though, and there was an immediate demand for the device. They were all standing on it. They flipped them off the back of the truck.
See how it'll lift you. And it'll
they dumped the guys.
Sling them into the thing. It's all right. How many would you like?
Yeah,
take this,
and they immediately bought. They're all laughing, hanging
two for
out.
you, three
great,
for you.
What a great moment! This is the beginning of the auto industry. You know?
So much better.
This is the beginning of the auto industry. It was like 1911. He said it was.
Mm-hmm.
This is gold, man. This is gold, and this isn't even boat racing. This is like just auto industry stuff, man. So anyways, so he formally filed a patent in 1912. He goes on to talk about his initial business partner. In late 1912, Wood and Waldref established the Wood Hydraulic Hoist Company in St. Paul. It goes on to talk about the details of the building and where it is. More on it. So in 1913, Wood sold his interest in the company to Waldref and moved to Detroit, Michigan, where he embarked upon the manufacture of hydraulic hoists and dump bodies in a big way. The interested parties listed, there's a whole bunch of people direct listed as far as ownership.
Right.
The company continued under the name Wood Hydraulic Hoist Company until August 17, 1917, when Waldref reorganized the firm as a hydraulic hoist manufacturing company. So he had some kind of a little bit of a rival to them or something, but I don't quite understand how they diverged. Like, he sold his interest, but then at the same time kept doing his own thing. I don't quite understand that. Maybe there's a little more detail in the article that I overlooked. But anyways, so it goes on to talk about all the different stuff they were making. There's a ton of different stuff. So, and then in 1930, Waldref sold his interest in the firm to Garwood, Rhodes, and Street Magazine Report. Okay, so then he did sell it back. There must have been some other stuff, and then he sold it all back to Garwood. There must have been, maybe Garwood could do half of the stuff. I don't get the whole thing, but we'll just keep people can read the article for themselves and detail it. So we'll keep going on here. So in the build up to the First World War, Wood received a number of subcontracts to supply Pierce Arrow and Packard with hydraulic hoists and dump bodies for the U.S. Allies and U.S. Army. As a result, Wood became a very wealthy man, pouring the profits into increased manufacturing capacity and improved a more diversified product line, and most famously into his hobby of powerboat racing. Wood eventually moved to Algonac, St. Clair County, Michigan, to personally oversee the production of his powerboats, which were constructed by Algonac's Chris Smith. Yada yada. We all went all through that. And then was there one last little bit here. So this is where we get back into the Lee Barrett, because he starts to quote him too.
Yeah.
And so he just said his involvement. So it says, what does it say? By the time he places because he stopped running the company in 1916 because he wanted to focus. He wanted to get into racing, and that's when he bought the Miss Detroit 1 at auction, and then he met up with Chris Smith. We covered all this in our the other shows, and then because at the start of the auction there was the Miss Detroit 1 had won, I believe it won the Gold Cup. And it says his involvement with Chris Smith stems from his 1916 purchase of Miss Detroit 1 at a noonday meeting of the Detroit Exchange Club. Originally constructed for the Detroit Racing Syndicate, the Miss Detroit Powerboat Association, the 205 horsepower Stirling engine vessel had won all 3 heats of the 1915 Gold Cup, America's coveted powerboat racing trophy. So it won the Gold Cup, and then in 1916. Miss Detroit 1 had been soundly defeated by Miss Minneapolis, a brand new Smith & Sons craft, and the Miss Detroit Syndicate needed to sell their old boat in order to finance construction of a vessel capable of defeating Miss Minneapolis. At the start of the auction, Lee Baird, a secretary of the Miss Detroit Powerboat Association, made a plea for some local Detroiter to help out the syndicate. And Garwood, flush with cash from his booming hydraulic hoist business, stepped up to the plate and became Miss Detroit 1's new owner. That's where we picked up, really. That's where we sort of began our 14 episode coverage. So anyways, and it goes on and on and on. It's a great article. I mean, it's worth reading. He covers a lot of stuff we did with Lee Barrett, but he's got a lot of stuff in there.
Right.
So anyways, I mean, to me, that's mind blowing. It's mind blowing stuff. You're talking about the early, everything that we talked about, like all the sort of like folklorish elements of his origin story. I think it was Garwood Jr. that I cited for the story about the coal truck. Like I saw an interview with him, and that was where I got my information about him, seeing some poor coal driver struggling to dump a truck, and he was like, "Wow, you just have a machine that do that, that's about to make $1 million."
He did, and
mathed
it out himself.
But we presented that at the time as, this is like a folklore thing. Like, I don't know, I don't really have a reference or anything, and this guy supports it all with tremendous context and tremendous sourcing, and it is a highly recommended article for just a really, really well done. And so, Mark Theobald, that's tremendous work, man. I would love to talk with him.
We'll link the article in the show notes for sure. And then also don't forget episodes 51 through 65. We document.
Yeah, if you haven't heard those yet and you want to pick up the rest of the story with
the rest of the Garwood story.
Yeah, jump back into episode 51 because from
there a lot of firsthand eyewitness from Speedboat Kings.
Exactly.
So
it's like this is kind of the equivalent of like with Star Wars, where you actually got you watch the episodes. You watch the newer ones, the episodes 1, 2, and 3 first, and now you get to go back and watch the originals as you watch the prequels in their proper order, right?
Yeah,
that's kind of like how I guess that's kind of how it is. You get to go back and watch this one because if this is the first one you've heard about Garwood, you heard the beginning of the story. Now you get to go back and watch the originals to listen to the rest of his story.
It is a good story. It's it just gets better and better. It just as we find more and more stuff.
Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah. So Garwood's my favorite story of all. I've said that numerous times, but this just adds more to that.
So what kind of boats was Garwood Jr. running in 1935?
So Garwood Jr. he's winning trophies all over the place. And I kind of look at Garwood Jr. as if anybody has any questions about some of the other stuff we talk about, like, the Detroit police had 2 pistol shooting championships, and then they had the team championship, right? And then we just talked about the swimmers. You had 2 individuals, and then you had the team's championship. Anybody that's like, well, that really only should count as 2, or any potential, I don't see how that you could make that case. I would be vigorously arguing that debate and most likely win. I don't know how you could win that argument. But a person might be, might try.
We already got a Garwood on the list. Why do we need another?
But what I'm saying though is that Garwood Jr. won a bunch of stuff in 1935, and I'm only counting him as one champion.
Oh, okay.
So so this is
you could count him as several. You could count him as several.
Exactly. Yeah. So Garwood Jr. So Bob Murphy of the Detroit Times shortly before Champions Day, 1936, April 16th, 1936. This is his little ditty on Garwood Jr. We got a picture of Garwood Jr. to throw up there.
We do.
So Garwood Jr. this is what Bob Murphy says in 1936. Since Garwood is the king of speed on water, it is entirely fitting that his son Garfield A. Wood Jr. should bear the title of Crown Prince. Gar Jr. is at present the national Class A interscholastic outboard champion. He is a youngster at 18 with auburn hair, every bit as thick as his famous father's white locks. So we got a couple pictures there. Of course, the sepia tone color, the rotogravure is off of the City of Champions newspaper. So he made the main cover with his dad, the main newspaper. And so this is a couple. So these are like what he won, just to show you all the differences. So 6 world records, 2 of them set by Garwood Jr. So he set 2 world records. This is Red Bank, New Jersey, August 17th, 1935. Right. So New Jersey, August 17th, 1935, 6 world records, 2 of them set by Garwood Jr., son of the famous international racing pilot, were recorded on the North Shrewsbury River late today as Betty Five, the defending champion, took the opening heat of the National Outboard Sweepstakes Regatta in the clinking time of 15 minutes and 37 seconds for the 15-mile distance. So a mile a minute in that thing. Young Wood, hailing from Algonac, Michigan, started the day auspiciously by winning that opening heat of the Class A event at 5 miles at 5 miles in a new amateur record average of 41.6 miles per hour. His time for the distance was 7 minutes and 12 seconds. Tom Tyson did 41.45 for the old record last month. Gar Jr. later took the opening heat of the Class C in 5:54 for an average of 42.452 miles an hour.
Wow.
Also rated as a record. He also won the second heat of the Class A field at 7.244. So he won, looks like right here, 3 right there, 6 world records. So two of them.
Yeah,
they're
three races and 2 are records.
Well, 2 of them are records. And then here's the thing is, I didn't even have this in my book, but I was just doing, again, a general search on Gar Jr. Found a New York Times article from July 1st, 1935. The article was July 2nd, but this refers to the day prior, that on July 1st, 1935, Gar Jr. set the outboard racing world record for speed on water in 1935. He did. And so this
how old was he at that time?
She caught me on the spot there.
Yeah.
It's he was, young. He's a youngster.
These photos,
like
these
16,
photos looks like
he's
he
young.
looks like he's 16.
So here's the little description right here. This is from the New York Times. On the article came out on July 2nd, 1935. And it says Garwood Jr. of Algonac High. So the location is Worcester, Massachusetts, July 1st. Garwood Jr. of Algonac High, Michigan, son of the famous speedboat racer, hung up his first world record in outboard racing this morning when he rode over the measured mile course on Lake Quinsigamont in his tiny Class C boat, propelled by a 24 horsepower motor at an average speed of 54.8 miles an hour.
Woo.
Outboard motor. So that's 3 that he got in 35.
Yeah.
2 in the race, 2 championships in the race. And then that's what they cited from the newspaper. They didn't even mention in the newspaper that he would also had a world record that year.
Yeah.
In outboard racing. So that's 3 for him. So, I mean, you could tack on 2 to the 30, to the 33 and make it 35.
Right.
Plus the one we're going to have Chris present, which at some point was, 36.
What's this?
It doesn't end.
Yeah.
It doesn't end. Every time you start scratching at this at any level. And when Tom was covering this back in the 80s, it was,
like
Abby Kushner.
Yeah.
Abby Kushner, the Lions trainer, was telling Tom that there was like 24 championships.
Yeah.
And Tom his whole life has been carrying the, there's 24 championships. I'm like, no, Tom is 33. And he's like, really? And I'm like, yeah, I started scratching into it a little bit and found a ton more. And here, like just doing the show, that's what I'm saying. We're just counting Garwood Jr. as one because he's like one person, but I'm just saying there's no end to it. You want to go and start digging into the homing pigeon records like they were talking about with Bob Murphy and that. You're gonna find some more interesting ones too.
I'm gonna bring that homing pigeon home.
Yeah,
I want to see the birds. I want to see the birds come to roost and get their proper due.
Yeah. So, anyways, it's just that's Gar Jr. and it's sort of reading a little bit more about his life after this sort of era. It looks like he didn't really pick up his father's mantle that much. Like the rest of his life spent building boats. He actually became an engineer for fishing for fishing poles.
Okay.
I guess he made some of the greatest fishing poles of his era. Like his fishing is not his fishing pole, but like the reel on the fishing pole was in like Sears and Roebuck's catalog and stuff like this. Like it was like this, unique design that people of the 40s and 50s used to clamor for.
Right.
So he went into fishing. He was into fishing and developing, fishing reels. Like, so he was a little bit, engineer of his own right. So, I did send you a video. I don't know if you wanted to play. It's a minute. I just want to show the boat race. It's like to kind of show what the outboard races look like. It's a minute long. Is it copyright strike? You think?
It's
all good. Somebody could just tell them what it is.
No. It's just, I'm going to share it because the audio is really, really bad. So I'm going to try to share it as a screen on here. Because in this way, I might.
Yeah, the audio's really rough. Yeah.
I might be able to mute the audio on it. Let's see. Let's share this.
But I think it said in the description that it's actually made for fair use. That they just want to share some of this history footage with people. But this is from 1937, I believe. And Gar Jr. is part of this race.
All right, I was able to.
And this is what an outboard race looked like. This is cool. This is really cool.
It's coming from Critical Past. There they go.
Yeah, so this is what they looked like, and I believe Garwood Jr. won this race too.
He's going 55 miles an hour.
Yeah, but this is what it looks like. This is a cool race. It's all a bunch of like kind of youngsters racing these little miniature outboard races. They look like miniature versions of Gar's boat. Like they're leaning forward, trying to like reduce friction.
Yeah,
look at them. See how he's like leaning forward on it. I mean, they're cruising.
Yeah,
they are cruising. I mean, I'd go watch a race like that, man. These kids look at that kid. He's ducking down below the front of the boat. They're cruising.
It's funny. Some of these have a crew of 2 and some have a crew of 1.
Yeah. Well, some maybe have a little bit bigger engine or something.
Yeah. And they're zipping around. The audio on this is just, that
it's
outboard.
Really bad, yeah.
Oh, look at that outboard just went to Hades.
But they're cruising. Look at these kids, man.
The audio on the is just bop, 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 bop,
yeah, but they are just totally cruising. I would totally watch a race like that. But it gives you an idea of the kind of outboard racing. Because when I had an idea, I'm like, what is it, like a fishing boat or something? Like, no, those things were friggin' cruising, man.
Mm-hmm.
They're going 50 miles an hour, and there's like not much between them and the river. I mean, this kind of looks like it's got a little bit of element of danger to it.
It looked very dangerous. That one boat was like the engine was like flipping around like a fish on the dock.
Yeah. But of course, he's got a little bit of an advantage. His dad's Gar Wood.
Yeah.
His dad's. And that the other video I upload, I don't know if you want to show it, but it's just him and his dad tinkering around with a little model boat on the river.
So this one I have uploaded, and the audio will play. Is going to cut us off.
She's taking a trip for the first trip. Well, we've run several tests of the V-bottom boats in competition with this new boat of ours, the new design, and now we're going to make another run. I place it in the water and then using a little electric starter to start the engine, and then let it go its way and check the time and check its performance in the seas. Well, there she goes. She's on her way now, making a nice little run. She's made a half turn. She's been steering pretty straight. This time she took a sachet and gone another direction. I don't know where she's going, but she's on her way. Well, she's pretty out of sight now. Pick out boat, conventional V-bottom boat as is used today. It's exactly the same as the Mosquito Fleet design. And that's the one we're going to be in competition with in this new boat. We're going to use the same engine. Turn it over, Junior. That's right. You see, we've removed all the stuff. We just put in the gearboxes and shafts, and later before we run the test, we're going to transfer the same little engine so we get exactly the same power, and we're going to use the same.
All right.
So it's a nice little moment of levity between that, and that was Garwood Senior's voice, and Gar Junior was
demonstrating
the young man,
the boats. It's
and they built the models first, and then they see how they performed, and
and that takes you back to that article that you read, where Gar was like working with like wind-up clocks and creating little
the engines
on models when he was a youngster and he kept building and testing and creating.
And that video that we just showed was from I think in 1938. And so think about that for a second. Garwood has been to the pinnacle of the mountain. I mean, the races we described, you've got the admiralty of the British government is facing off with Garwood on the Detroit River. He's raced trains. He's built the Miss America 10. He's had, this guy, there is no higher level that a person could ever achieve. And here he is building models.
Let's work up some models.
Let's work up some models and a boat.
Let's see if we make this a little faster.
And then the great thing is it's just such a little moment of levity where the boat just cruises. He goes, I don't know where it's going.
It's
gone.
It took a wrong turn.
Just heads out to sea.
We'll be paddling to get that one.
If anybody finds a little scraps of a model boat somewhere, man, that's a collector's item, I would think. But, it's just I just thought it was a fun little video of Garwood, Senior and Junior building models. But this guy he's reached the pinnacle of the mountain, and that boat he was building looked kind of basic, right? And he's like, here we are testing out this model for a boat we're building in this competition. He's still building boats. This is a guy, the article supports it that we read today. This is a guy who loved this sport, man. He loved it. And that article right there, that video right there where he's just building this model with his son, that could have been any guy, USA 1950s, building a Pinewood Derby car with his son. He doesn't, he's not coming across as some, multi-millionaire. He's like, hey, Junior, let's experiment and, build a model boat that's like $1 million with this whole boat crew out there doing it or whatever. He's building it himself with his son. This is a guy, it's more depth to an already fascinating character. From my favorite story of the City of Champions, and it adds just more depth to what we're already what we've already sort of covered. So
I love it. All right, so that was episode 104, champion number.
I got it on here. I haven't. This is number 25, but 25. It's add in the 4, the Tigers, Lions, Red Wings plus the Olympics. So this is 29. So we've got 4 more of the other champions to go.
All right. I like it. We got some video on when we get to the horse. I found
Did you find it?
I have those videos.
Awesome, man. I don't think I've ever even seen it.
So we'll have that one coming up. So everybody, thank you for joining us for this prequel and all these stories. Like, subscribe, leave a comment, do all those podcast things and all the podcast
every
places.
Comment, every share, it really helps.
It is. And then DetroitCityOfChampions.com, wearingfunny.com for merch and all the good stuff. And reach out. Leave a comment and
reach out. Everything we do help. Like I say, we're all everybody's part of this. We're trying to bring it back.
One person at a time,
one like at a time. Everything.
Interesting. Please share it. Again, so like, subscribe, leave a comment, and we're going to do it again very, very soon. It's Detroit City of Champions, the podcast.